Welcome everyone to July's 2026 episode of Spiritual Questions Answered. And tonight we have a very interesting topic. Alright, topic we have for tonight is living a spiritual life is precious. Okay, and first of all, we got to try and define what a spiritual life is, and of course, why is it precious? Yeah. So, as to what a spiritual life is, I think everyone has a good idea or an idea of your own. Now, if you would like to know the way we define a spiritual life, you can take a look at one of the earlier videos that is on our YouTube channel. It's called Foundations of Spirituality. So, of course, when you talk about spiritual life, there is, a religious life can be a spiritual life, but a spiritual life need not necessarily be a religious life. All right. So, just in case some of you are wondering, okay. So, for those of you who know sets and Venn diagrams, right? So, if this whole thing is spirituality, being spiritual, religion is a subset of spirituality. Okay, so being spiritual is more than being religious, and the important points essentially being a spiritual person is being a good person. All right, and you can have a religious practice. All right, one of the most important points is being spiritual and going beyond yourself, usually upwards towards humanity, practicing mindfulness, that kind of thing. Okay. So when I say practicing mindfulness, it need not necessarily be mindfulness as in just meditative kind of mindfulness. All right, being mindful means being aware, being aware, being mindful of the way we act, the way we speak, and so on. Yeah, so mindfulness is not just the mindfulness meditation practice. So living a spiritual life. Now, why is it precious? Now, to understand why a spiritual life is precious, we need to consider 2 points of views. All right, and the point of view has to do with consciousness. Okay, so whether a spiritual life is precious or not will actually have to depend on our level of consciousness, or from what angle of consciousness are we talking about. Now, I actually did a video about different experiences of consciousness, whereby I talk about us humans having more than one consciousness, or being able to experience more than one type of consciousness. But just for tonight's talk, all right, I'm going to simplify things, keep it very simple. So in terms of consciousness, I'm going to simplify into 2, all right? In general, most of us experience consciousness in terms of 2 types of consciousness. So the first type of consciousness, which most people are familiar with, is the fact that we are physical, and most people experience themselves as a form of consciousness that is physical consciousness. And by physical consciousness means we are conscious because of our physical body, right? Because we have a physical body, we have senses, we have the brain, and our brain enables us to be cognitively aware and able to understand things and perceive our environment, our surroundings, to think, and so on. So most people experience life as a physical consciousness. Okay, Now, beyond physical consciousness, we actually have a spiritual consciousness within us. And for the most part, most people on earth are not aware that we have a spiritual consciousness. Now, when I say aware, I mean like experientially aware. There are, of course, many people, because they are spiritual or because they are into religions, and some religions talk about us having souls and spirits and life beyond the physical body. Yeah, otherwise, our physical consciousness is entirely based on the body. And once our physical body expires, the consciousness is supposed to go off. It's like, if the body dies, the brain dies, right? The consciousness is a result of the brain. Then, end of story. But we have a part of us that is spiritual, and that consciousness can persist beyond the physical body. All right, and for those of you who are very interested on this topic, I will refer you to a separate video because I don't have time to cover everything. I have a separate video on our podcast, same podcast, Spiritual Questions Answered. And there is a video there that talks about what happens to our consciousness when we die. If I'm not wrong, that's the name of the video, yeah? What happens to our consciousness when we die? And that's where we talk about how people can experience the spiritual consciousness. Okay, usually near-death experience, and other times that people experience spiritual consciousness is when we meditate to a certain level. So not everyone who meditates get to experience spiritual consciousness, but if you meditate enough in a certain way or in some ways, it is possible for us to experience spiritual consciousness. And for those of you who don't believe it, it's fine. I hope you can suspend your belief. Just take it from me and also many people who have experienced so, that there is a spiritual consciousness. Now, let me be very clear. If we are going to live life based on just physical consciousness, as a physical consciousness, that means of the body, senses, and so on, there is actually very little value in trying to live a spiritual life in general. All right, in general, if your consideration is just being a physical being, physical consciousness, the spiritual life is actually not precious. Yeah, because think about it. Yeah, if we are just a physical consciousness and we are experiencing life through our senses, we are actually just very advanced or very high level type of animal or creature. Yes, and and what we really need is just to meet the needs of the body, to eat, sleep, and so on. But also, as advanced cognitive beings, we may want to have a lot of pleasure, right? Especially pleasure through our senses because we are physical beings. And many people will live that way because many people only believe in the physical consciousness. Now, a spiritual life is only precious when we consider the fact that we have spiritual consciousness, and our spiritual consciousness will persist beyond our physical body. And I will have to talk about this concept. Basically, we have our consciousness is capable and very able to persist beyond death and beyond one death, and it can persist such that it can go through reincarnation or rebirth. It doesn't matter, there are people who who say these two terms mean different things is okay. Yeah? More or less it means the same thing. So we don't, our spirits does not just, our spirit, our soul don't just live one life, and we can persist and live lives after lives, because there is reincarnation and rebirth. And this actually applies whether you believe in it, you don't believe in it, whether your religious belief and whatsoever, it applies to everyone. Okay, so how do I know this? So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ket, K-E-T, Ket, and I'm the co-founder of CordyKet. And this is partnership between my wife and I. And we are energy healers who specialize in spiritual healing. So we do a lot of spiritual work. And so I just want to keep this brief. How do I know this? Is because I do spiritual work. All right. And I can tell you that a lot of my work involves sending spirits off to light, helping them cross over to light, or go back to heaven, however you want to say it. And I would say that a lot of the souls that do not cross over are souls that live largely their lives as a physical being and not living a spiritual life. Not living a spiritual life. And most of the time, okay, based on my work, based on my experience, and I've been doing this work since 2010, the souls that cross over to light are usually the ones who live a spiritual life. All right? Those who cross over to light are the ones who live a spiritual life. And those who don't cross over, they are stranded, or they remain stranded here on earth, or they be caught and brought to hell, and so they suffer. All right, they suffer, and it's possible for a long period or even for eternity. I mean, maybe not eternity like forever, but for a very long time, until somehow they get to cross over to the light. So now, this is one of the number one points, one of the more important points that I want to make, based on my experience. If most people who don't live a spiritual life, they find it difficult to cross over to the light. And most people, even if you don't believe it, you will find that you will have a spiritual, you will persist beyond your death. Okay, find out more in the video. What happens to our consciousness when we die? Okay, so one first point is very important, is you want to okay, cross to light, go to light. That is a very important point. Now, the next thing we want to discuss is reincarnation and rebirth. So reincarnation and rebirth is real. Okay, so for those of you who know about reincarnation and rebirth, there's a big question, right? The big question is why? Why do we reincarnate? Why is there rebirth? Now, I'm going to give the short answer here, because if you want to discuss this, it will be very long. Basically, we have a spirit or soul inside us that persists, and our soul reincarnates. And the whole point of reincarnation is actually for evolution. Okay, our soul wants to evolve into a higher state or higher dimension, higher vibrations. And that is the purpose of reincarnation. Now, sorry, I have to point you out to another video that I did. So the other video that I did has something to do, can't remember the name. Has something to do with achieving nirvana. Something to do with achieving nirvana. All right. So because a lot of people ask me the question, how to get out of this reincarnation cycle, how to get out of samsara, how to be enlightened. Yes, enlightened. How to achieve enlightenment. I think the video is something about that. Enlightenment. All right. Now, in order for us to achieve enlightenment, so the whole idea of evolution, all right, you can say more or less, okay, is to help people to achieve enlightenment. If enlightenment is too heavy a word for you, basically we want to evolve. We want to evolve better and better, and we want to reach a certain level of vibrations, or in more earthly terms, is spiritual cultivation, whereby some will call it enlightenment. There will be different terms: nirvana, moksha, and so on. Christ consciousness, and okay, whichever religion they may have different terms. The idea is evolve until a very high level, and once we reach that high level, we can stop or pause in the reincarnation and rebirth, because we have reached a very high level of spiritual cultivation, or high frequency, high dimension. So this is something that is real. Okay, now the question is, then why then is spiritual life precious? Because we are supposed, we keep on reincarnating. All right. Now the whole point of reincarnation is to achieve this, and if you don't achieve one life, you can do it in another life. Okay. Now therein, some people who knows that there is reincarnation, they still don't take it very seriously. So this is where we would like to discuss this point, that living a spiritual life is actually very precious. Okay. So one point is crossing to light. So the second point is we would like to reach enlightenment, or the journey never ends. We keep on reincarnating. Now, living a spiritual life is precious because when we go through reincarnations, right? When we go through reincarnations, not every life we live a spiritual life. In fact, spiritual lives are quite rare. All right, spiritual lives are actually quite rare. Look around you. Look at your friends. Look at your family. How many of them are actually spiritual? Now, if you come from a family, or you have a lot of friends that are very spiritual, good for you. But can you see that most people are not spiritual? It's quite rare. Wei-Ling is asking, why is it rare? It's rare because many people subscribe to this, that it is a physical existence. Yeah, and a lot of people, they don't have spiritual beliefs, especially in modern world, and people's values nowadays are guided towards materialism, right? Materialism, hedonism, enjoying life. Don't you think so? And people, so society in general is very geared towards status, money. And so people get caught. How many of us, how many of you, how many of us were once in the rat race of life, of career, trying to earn more money and more money, but we are, not really happy. I think I'll just answer some of the questions here as we go along, instead of saving towards the end where appropriate. So, Eddie is asking, will non-spiritual disease cross over to light if she just let go? That was answered in previous videos. So especially the one, what happens to our consciousness when we die. Yeah. So whether they cross over to light depends on the last rites and what they do at the end, um, especially at the end of life. Yeah, at the end of life is very important. You can be not a spiritual person, right? You want to cross the light. You can be not a spiritual person for the most part of your life, but you would like to cross over your to light. And the last, even maybe the last day or the last few hours, if you are very really spiritual, you can cross over to light. Okay. Lynn is asking, was a soul more likely to live a spiritual life in the last? Lynn, are you referring to the last life being a spiritual life or in the past? All right. Was a soul more likely to live a spiritual life in the past? Now, okay, so I'm trying to get to this point, yeah? The spiritual life is precious because as we reincarnate, most people's lives are actually not spiritual, and most of our lives and even our past lives may not be spiritual. This is based on law of the averages. For most people, their lives are actually not spiritual. And just look around you and you get the idea why. Simple as that. Now, if you are here because you have some appreciation for spirituality, right? After all, actually, we are having, it's supposed to be right? They're supposed to be spiritual questions answered. So I assume everyone who's here, you have some degree of appreciation for spirituality, right? And if you have some degree of appreciation for spirituality, I think when you look around at your friends, you also will appreciate that many of your friends, probably friends and relatives, they are actually not very interested in spirituality. So it is quite rare. Now think about this, okay? So let's say in reincarnation, I'm just going to give a ballpark figure, okay? A ballpark figure. It doesn't matter how many past lives, but let's say in general, we do a very simple thing, okay? You know the 80-20 rule. I'm just using the 80-20 rule, okay? Whereby for top achievers and everything, so the reincarnation thing has a whole purpose is to evolve, all right, and to achieve enlightenment. So let's say if we take 80-20 rule, whereby 20% of the lives that we're going to have will be a spiritual life, whereby there will be positive evolution, or whereby there will be positive evolution towards the direction of enlightenment. Now this evolution towards enlightenment, it will require living a spiritual life. This is required. And 80% of those lives, of the other lives, we will be, we may not have the opportunity to meet people or, either to meet the people or find certain spiritual practices or religion that are that we identify with, that we jive with, such that we will live a spiritual life. And 80% of those will probably be living a very physical-based life, or we could just be, we could be born in a place whereby access to spiritual knowledge is more limited. You get what I mean? Okay, so 80% of the lives we could be wasting our, I mean, no offense, yeah, no offense, we could be not making progress on this path, on the spiritual evolution path. And so, um, imagine this, yeah. If 20% of our lives we are progressing spiritually, evolving towards enlightenment, 80% of those lives we could be, we're supposed to go up and up and up, but because 80% of the lives we may go up and then we come down, and and then so you get what I mean? We'll be going up and down, up and down, up and down. And this is why the spiritual life is precious. The moment, all right, we have a spiritual life, and when we realize it, the idea is we would like to make a leap we would like to ascend as much as possible. All right, and hope that on the other lives whereby we descend, we don't descend so much, and then we try to, you get what I mean? That means every time when we realize that we are on a spiritual path, we want to make as much headway as possible, because 80% of our lives as we reincarnate may not, we may not be moving in the right direction. We may be going down. And should you be on, be very aware that you be aware of spirituality and the fact that there's this reincarnation, and you should do beyond, we should live beyond just considering physicality, then congratulations, right? You are good right now. And the question is, how far do you want to take this life and your soul, your spirit, in terms of spiritual evolution? That is the question. So, the moment we realize we have a very good opportunity when we are living a spiritual life, make use of it. Now, what are you going to do? How to make use of a spiritual life? Now, one of the things I'm going to highlight is this, yeah? So once you have some awareness of this reincarnation and evolution thing, and the fact that, hey, most of our past lives or the lives that we're going to live is not going to be spiritual lives, you want to take advantage of it. Now, what I would like to recommend is, if you are on a spiritual path or having a spiritual life, do this, yeah? If you've not already done so, spend some time to identify a spiritual path that would suit you, suit your character, your temperament. All right. Now, the thing that I would like everyone to point out to everyone is, not all spiritual paths are alike. Most of the spiritual paths are good paths. Okay, and I would stress this. We would like the spiritual path to be one that is a spiritual path of light. Now, if you don't know what the spiritual path of light is, I just did the talk last month. The video is uploaded onto our YouTube. It's called The Path of Light. So I'm just going to summarize. Okay, in general, most of the religions, most of the traditional religions, they are part of the path of light. Okay, they're part of the path of light, but within each religion, there may be sects and cults that deviate from light. And how do we know this? Myself and my wife, and we train our disciples and students, and anyone who learns from us, how to be sensitive to this light that the divine has, all right, that heaven has, the good spirits all have. And this same energy is persistent in all the spiritual paths, religious paths, spiritual paths that are of light. Okay, if you would like to learn more about it, okay, please watch the previous video. It's called The Path of Light. Now, so my point is this. So if you have this great spiritual awareness that you would like to live a spiritual life, and it is precious, identify a spiritual path that is of light. Okay, that is good, that is of light, and then go with it. So it can be a religion, it can be spiritual, up to you, but make sure it is a path of light. And in general, it must be based on goodness. All right, in general, it must be based on goodness. Now, then the next thing I would like to talk about will be stages. So now, living a spiritual life, it's not easy. You will go through many different stages. Of course, you will have the first stage is usually discovery. All right, so um, there's a lot of discovery to do, whether it's self-discovery or discovery of the different paths of like different spiritual paths. So there's a lot to discover here, and I would like to mention something. All right, now as we go through different stages, there's something that we need to be very aware of, which are what are called pitfalls. All right, they may be, as we go through different stages, there are things that can lead us off path. Okay, so while we're doing discovery, a very common pitfall will be this. Fascination, or maybe I need to be more specific, is a over fascination. Now, inevitably, when we first begin on our spiritual path, and for people who are not spiritual to begin with, or who are very newbie, or who are totally clueless to what spiritual path is, at the beginning of the discovery stage, wow, there's like so much to learn, yeah, and it's very fascinating. It's very fascinating. Now, I would like to remind everyone, when you're going through this stage, do not get stuck in the fascination mode. Do not be overly fascinated. All right. So I see a lot of people, they go into spirituality, and most of them are stuck at the first stage. Okay, because they are overly fascinated with different things about spirituality. Okay? Do not lose sight that what we're trying to achieve here is evolution. All right. So the discovery should go towards evolution. There'll be lots of discovery there, but please do not forget about the evolution objective. All right, we want to evolve spirituality, find out in the path of light, whichever path you're on, how it will help you evolve, all right, to higher spirituality. And usually, it will reach something like enlightenment. All right, there's usually an endpoint somewhere with different spiritual paths. So this is usually the first stage. Now, the second stage is usually healing. So some people don't like the word healing because it implies that there is something wrong. They need to heal themselves from a state that is not so desirable. Whether you call it healing, some people will call it reconstruction, redefinition. You all get me? Yeah. So this stage is more or less the same for everyone. So first thing is you need to discover the next stage. All right, and this stage is probably the stage that is the longest. Okay, because if you are really on the stage whereby you have identified the spiritual path, the spiritual path will aim to help us to reconstruct or redefine ourselves or to heal ourselves to be a better person. All right, it's part of evolution. It's part of evolution. It's still evolution. But there is going to be a lot of healing, a lot of reconstruction, and the way we define ourselves is going to go through changes. All right, it's going to go through changes, and the way we see ourselves, the way we relate with people, with society, with family, it can be something that is very it's very eye-opening. It can be very relieving, yet at the same time, for some people, it can be very scary. Okay, so this is usually the second stage, and then so the third stage is normally a maturity stage. Okay, it's normally a maturity stage. I'm keeping it simple, yeah. Now, the difference between the second stage and the third stage is not to say that in the third stage, whereby there's maturity, it does not mean that the person have reached end point. All right, but compared to the earlier stages of healing, it is more about maturing, more stable, and really understanding the spiritual path, and then there is not so much of redefining or healing the past and so on, but it's really the path and you are walking the path. Okay, so that is the maturity phase, and the next phase, all right. So maybe it's sensitive. Okay, the next phase you can call it some kind of a mastery, or maybe mastery is not the right word. So the next stage would be what I call, more accurately, with emancipation. All right, emancipation, whereby you start to transcend, you start to go beyond. Okay, let me just give you the dictionary meaning. Emancipation. Liberation, freeing. So now, if we are on a spiritual path, one that's of light, as we evolve higher and higher towards enlightenment, is a form of emancipation, freeing, letting go, and all this. What I covered in the video, the path of light. You will experience emancipation, and again, this is not it's not a binary phase. It's not like you go to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's like distinct phases. It's not distinct like steps. Okay, so even discovery, it can be a long period discovery, various stages of healing, reconstruction, redefining yourself, various stages of maturity, and then when you reach the emancipation stage, there are different degrees of emancipation. Now, so the thing is this, yeah. When you reach the stage of emancipation, there are a few pitfalls that you need to take note of. All right. So one of the main pitfalls here will be ego. All right. So there are a lot of people who reach this stage, and If the foundation is not strong, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 is not strong, and they let ego or pride get back to them, then actually the vibration and everything, uh, the person, everyone has an energy. Yeah, the soul, the spirit will have an energy, and if you get affected by ego, you will go back down. All right, your spiritual level will go back down. Okay, so ego is one of the pitfalls. Now, another thing is you may need to ask yourself. Now, there is this may be a pitfall, it may not be a pitfall, but there is this thing. Um, you may end up in a state of over emancipation. All right. Now, what do I mean by over emancipation? Now, different people will define it differently. Okay. Now, when you are on this spiritual path, okay, and as you mature, as you go through the different stages, you need to ask yourself, how far are you going to take this spirituality thing to? Okay, so what I mean by over emancipation is, now if okay, let me put it this way. Let me share with you our experience. Yeah. So between Cordelia and I, yeah. So when we are on this path and we are on a spiritual path, we do spiritual work, and we have greater appreciation of spirituality, and we go do meditation. Yeah, we lead meditation, spiritual retreats, and so on, and we go deep into meditation. Yeah. Now, one of the things about going very deep into meditation and if you spend a lot of time in meditation, especially, you can enter this stage of over emancipation. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's take the example of us, okay, Cordelia and myself. Those of you who don't know, Cordelia is my wife. And so those of you, if you know us, we are husband and wife team, and we have a son. Okay. Now, what I mean by over emancipation is if you go too much into meditation, it's possible that you would like to go all the way to enlightenment. All right, and it's possible when you enter meditation, and as you let go of your attachments, it is possible for some people to be attached to non-attachment, or be attached to the enlightened states that one can reach in meditation. All right, that is a possible pitfall. Now, if when we enter meditation and we experience that super high level of spirituality, or emptiness, or emancipation, freedom, moksha, whatever you want to call it, or experience of God, with source of light, with whichever divine, and bliss, all right? Some people get very attached, and it's too much over. They get over it, and that is when people can make decisions that can be interpreted as very drastic. Like, okay, so I mean, if Cordelia entered meditation until so high, and she chooses to want to be in that kind of state for extended periods, it will mean that she will have to leave me and our son, yeah, and not live earthly life, and maybe, all right, become like one of those Indian yogis, right? Just go and meditate, and just be close to spirituality, to the gods, to the divine, and to emptiness, to liberation, moksha, whatever. So this is something that you will have to ask yourself when the time comes, all right? When the time comes, or even now, when you're pursuing this spiritual path, how far are you willing to take it? All right, for example, some of you who read about the story of Buddha, some people who are very family oriented will disagree with what Buddha did in leaving his wife and young son, all right, to go on a spiritual path, right? So some people will see that, hey, there's a no, you crossed the line. But that's what Buddha did, and he found a way to relieve suffering for everybody on earth. So bear in mind there can be this pitfall. So the main thing, all right, initially will be fascination. Now on the healing, okay, there can be a certain pitfall that when people go through this healing, they get stuck on in their healing phase. So some people, now healing is a wonderful phase, stage. You're redefining yourself, reconstructing yourself, and so on, and you're feeling yourself better and better. But there are some people that get stuck in that because they are not able to see a better version of themselves moving forward, moving beyond their past. So don't get stuck over there. Okay? So when you have identified that you are possibly living a spiritual life, okay, my advice is try to make the most out of it. Make the most out of it. Spend some time, identify a spiritual path of light that is of light, okay, and put in your time and effort, and try to go through these stages and look out for the pitfalls. Okay, so let me take a look at some of your questions and did I miss out anything? Okay. Edwin was saying they can't see the benefit, too much attachment to earthly desire things. Yes, those people who are those people who are very of the physical, too much on the physical consciousness, they won't be able to see the benefit. Cora's asking, what of indigenous spirituality practices is rooted in nature and also with respect to ancestors? Yeah, so very good question. So now indigenous spirituality also have those that are path of light and those that are not path of light. All right, so I think we did a very good video last month on the path of light. So even nature, right, it can be of light. And when it comes to ancestors, with respect to ancestors, I also did another video about praying to and making offerings to ancestors. Now again, so a summary is when we are praying or making offerings to ancestors, you got to be aware whether are you offering to those that are of light or not of light. Wei Ling was saying, rare due to our doings. I was thinking if it's due to human choices or by heavenly design, it's rare. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, I do think there are people who are spiritual, but not necessarily religion of light, yes, or path of light. Eileen made a comment, spiritual bull run while we can. Exactly, yes. Because of the 80-20 rule, all right, and there are, some of us can remember our past life, and some of us will be able to remember our past life whereby we did terribly. Okay, we may have gone the other end. Instead of living a good spiritual life, we live a bad spiritual life, as in maybe be on the dark side, or just be a terrible human being causing suffering to others. So when we have a spiritual life, just go on the bull run, yeah, like Eileen says. Wei Ling says, so back to basic questions. What is considered a spiritual life? So I did mention, at the beginning of the talk, I did a talk on foundations of spirituality, and last month we talked about path of light. So essentially, spiritual life is about being good, being a good person. There'll be practice of non-attachment, being mindful, and also beyond self for humanity. Okay, these are some of the salient points. I've been saying too much attachment. One negative side, human fundamental darkness. Try pulling one down and go for higher spiritual life. Yes, there are always those pitfalls. Callista is asking, what does spiritual consciousness mean? Is there a video about spiritual consciousness? Yes, so Callista, there is this video I did about that is called "What Happened to a Consciousness When We Die." Okay, what happened to a consciousness when we die? And in that video, I made a very clear distinction. Most of us live as a consciousness, as in a physical consciousness, which means body-based or brain-based. Okay, we experience life through our body and we identify very closely with the body. But we also have our spiritual consciousness, and which is why life can, consciousness can persist beyond beyond physical death. Okay, so you can take a look at the video. So what I'm saying is most people on earth identify with the physical consciousness and do not realize that it's a spiritual consciousness. Okay, the spiritual consciousness is real, and that's why there's reincarnation and all that. All those are real. And because all those are real, it's only when you take a look from the point of view of spiritual consciousness will the spiritual life be precious. Because if you're just considering physical experiences, a spiritual life is actually not precious at all. Because so what? I'm going to die anyway. Yeah. So yeah, people will think if I'm going to die anyway, I might as well enjoy life, right? Lin is asking, so there's a spiritual path of dark? Yeah, of course there will be those that are positive and there will be those that are dark, right? At least say that Buddha has mission to help the masses, correct? Joe is asking, what's the definition of enlightenment in this path of light? Okay, Joe, are you around? So I actually did a video about how to achieve enlightenment. All right, so we were 1 hour and there's quite a lot of talk about that. Okay, so but essentially, okay, you need to evolve and your frequency higher and quite a bunch of things there. Okay, please look up the video because I don't have 1 hour to explain. Time is running out for today's session. Callista asking, since most people around us are not on the spiritual path, how can one start identifying spiritual path of light? Very good question. Now, let me ask you, have you all noticed this, yeah? Most of us and many people live life as a physical being, all right? And we live life being affected by society and values that are passed down to us from our parents and our family. And usually it's a very in today's world, yeah, it's normally very materialistic, and it's talking about you should get good education so that you can have a good career, so that you can earn decent income, so that you can support your family and your dependents and so on, right? And you talk about achievement for status, for fame, for power, for more money, that kind of thing. Yes. Can we agree there's something like that? Now, the thing is, so many people enter this stream of way of life, and something tends to happen to most people who are on this normal stream, yeah, this mainstream earthly life thing. All right, there's this thing. There's this thing that suddenly happened to people, all right, and it's called midlife crisis. Okay, it's called midlife crisis. How many of you have gone through a midlife crisis? It doesn't matter whether it's really in the middle of your life or it has to be between a certain age. But some people will go through something like a midlife crisis whereby you are already an adult, right? You're already an adult and you already have a career, right? You have jobs, or you are in between jobs, and suddenly you're overwhelmed. You for no reason or just because of whatever that's going on in your life, you enter this crisis, and it's generally called midlife crisis. It can happen, from late 20s to 50s or even 60s. Suddenly you just feel that you don't know what you want in life anymore. Yeah, you can be successful or you can be not successful, and you'll be asking, why am I doing this? What for? For what? Yes, And then you start to question a lot of things. It's like, why am I torturing myself? Why am I living such a stressful life, stressing myself day in, day out? Maybe compromising on physical health, sleep, or relationships, and so on. And you have big questions. Midlife crisis happens. And the wonderful thing is this, midlife crisis, I think, sometimes or a lot of times is our spiritual side. And if you don't believe in spiritual side, it's our subconscious, inner knowing of our mind, of our brain, trying to bring to our awareness that whatever we've been living, for all the material stuff, it is not really truly satisfying in the deepest sense, and midlife crisis happens. And this is when people will suddenly, from midlife crisis, they will do, right? You heard of this term, yeah? Soul searching. It's not as if you're searching for souls, but you dive deep into yourself and you ask questions. And whether you know it or not, you are on the beginning of stage 1 and stage 2, discovery and healing. And that is when you will talk to people more. You will try and as your energy shifts, as your awareness shifts, you will reach out, or you will, at least in today's world, you will Google, or you go into AI even, ask questions, and answers will come. And they will not be your normal, everyday, earthly type of answers that you get from those people that are not on the spiritual path. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So most of the time, things take care of themselves. But many people will fall back, into old ways of being, and it is okay. All right, it's okay if the spiritual path seems a little daunting, seems a little tough, especially for people who go through healing. The healing stage can be very tough for some people, and people can get stuck. And sometimes it's because some people have very deep trauma. They have really, they have very strong obstacles to overcome. It could be, very difficult childhood kind of thing, trauma. So it can be very tough for some people. Now, if you have the willpower in you, the spirit in you, my advice is this: try to understand that the spiritual life is really precious. You can take a break, and when you can, when you're rested enough, go again. All right, and like Eileen says, make a bull run for it. Make the most out of it, because if you have actually stumbled upon the path of light, you have met, you've encountered the path that you want to go on, and you think you found it. Just think, in all your other past lives or in your future lives, you may not have such a good opportunity again. So if you are on a spiritual path of light that is good for you, all right, that it's good, make the best out of it. Okay, it is really, really precious. Okay, any more questions before we call it a night, call it a day? All right, I think that there are no questions. So thank you for having me, for listening to me. And if you feel that this talk has been beneficial to you, please do consider making a donation to support our online events, which are free for most people to attend. How to make a donation will be in the groups. And if you can't afford it, it's okay, all right? It's still free for you to attend, and you can ask your friends and family to attend too. Yeah, and if you're interested in our practices, right, do join us. Tomorrow I'll be teaching Unity Qigong, and do spend some time if you're interested in all these spiritual questions. in our podcast. Okay, a lot of topics are there. So thank you, everyone. Oh, Coral, any words of encouragement for when it gets difficult? Now, so like I said, sometimes it can get very difficult. Now, even when it's difficult, take heart that you are on the path. All right, and as long as you're on the path, you can take a break. You are on the path. It's okay to take a break on the path, and it's okay to go slow when things are tough. And if you need to take a break such that you need to get off the path, and if you really need to, it is also fine. Okay, it is also fine. But know that as you keep walking the path, it can only get better. And whatever you achieve in your spiritual life, all right, it contributes to your soul's overall progression towards the final destination. Yeah. So just do what you can. Do what you can. Do what you can when you can. And remember, yeah, those of you, you're not sure what the path of light is, just watch the video on the path of light. Have an understanding, it's not that difficult. Yeah, and just keep walking the path. Okay. And yeah, Lin says you're not alone. Xiaofang, like riding a bike, take breaks but continue going. Over time, we'll reach the destination. That's correct. Okay, everyone, thank you. Have a good day, good night, and goodbye.